Hey everybody, this is Amy here, and we're going to do a fun art project today. So let me go over the list of what we need to do this project. You will need some watercolor paper. Definitely use watercolor paper, not regular paper, because watercolor paper is made for watercolors and will work much better for you. We also need some oil pastels, a black Sharpie, some watercolor paints. There we go. One line that comes in a tray like that. Those would be perfect. A tray of watercolors. A round paintbrush. I have a size 6 round paintbrush. It's about that size, kind of a medium size of a paintbrush. That works really good for this project. Some paper towels, a cup of water, and some table salt, just plain table salt, and I usually pour it in a little container for easy access to it. And also for this one, we need to dry our layers before we move on, so I recommend having a hair dryer handy to speed up the process. Now you can wait till it dries, you can wave it in the air or blow on it, but this hair dryer just makes it a lot quicker. All right, so let's get started with this project. So you want to get your watercolor paper out and put it in landscape direction. We are going to do that. Move this off to the side. All right. So we're going to get our water handy there and our paints out next to us and our paper towels handy. So before we get painting though, we are going to actually put some oil pastel on our paper first. We are going to, this is called a wax resist technique, and the oil in the oil pastels does not allow the paint to stick to it. It resists the paint. So it'll show through the paint and look really cool. And so like my original picture, we're going to add some under the sea algae, or the little starfish if you want. You can be creative, some bubbles in the water, whatever you would like to add. We're going to add the fish and the jellyfish later, but right now we're just going to add some seaweed and some bubbles. So I'm going to get some greens out, a couple different greens, white for my bubbles, make a yellow starfish, and some brown sand on the bottom of my ocean there. So I'm just going to go ahead and just color a little bit of brown on the bottom. And with oil pastels, I usually color short strokes close together. That way we get a lot of color and that white paper in the background filled in. So I'm just doing it right at the very, very bottom, because I want mostly the water to show in my picture. I don't want a lot of the bottom of the ocean. So I'm just going to do a little bit along the bottom there. It does not have to be straight. I made mine kind of a curvy line because I believe the bottom of the ocean probably has some dips and little hills and stuff in it. So I did it that way. All right, then I'm going to take my green and I'm just going to make some curvy lines starting at the bottom. And I'm just going to curve up and stop. And I'm pushing pretty hard so I get a nice dark color from that. And then different sizes, because I don't think they're all the same sizes. I think they're a little bit different and random. There we go. And then I'm going to take my light green. I like to make different shades of green when I'm doing stuff like this, just to make it a little more interesting and maybe a little more realistic looking. So I'm going to add some light green. Now you could go all the way across the bottom. I'm doing mine kind of framing my picture because I'm gonna create a lighter area of water, darker water around the edge, and then add my little sea creatures later. That's why I'm only creating some on the side here. All right, once I have my seaweed in there, I am going to add my little starfish. And he's kind of lying on the bottom, so he's not going to be, you might not see all of his legs. You might just see maybe one or two sticking up a little bit. But he's laying there on the bottom of the ocean floor there. You could add a seashell if you wanted a seashell. That would be great too. All right, so now I'm going to know that with the white, you aren't going to see it as well on the white paper. So you might have to tilt your paper after you draw it and see. But I'm just going to make some white bubbles, some little white circles on my paper. Bubbles going up, just random. There we go. You can kind of see a little bit. If I tilt my paper, you might be able to barely see some of those on there. So you can add as many of those as you want. Okay, now I'm done with my oil pastels. I'm going to set those aside. Now the fun part, adding some watercolor. So with this particular painting, since it's under the sea, we're going to use cool colors and the cool colors are purple, blue, and green. So I'm going to use a combination of those three colors on this paper. But I'm going to start with kind of my lighter colors, my green and my blue in the center, and then I'm going to get darker as I go out away from the center. So the first technique I'm going to use is called wet on wet, where I'm going to just put some plain water kind of in the middle and add my paint and kind of let the paint do what it wants to do in the middle. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my clean brush wet. And I'm just going to paint the center of my paper with some water here. Now I like to hold my paintbrush right where that little metal part and the handle come together. And that just gives me way more control over my paintbrush. Easier than if you're way out here at the end of your brush. You can kind of tell your paintbrush where to go a little bit better. So I'm just going to paint some water on here. Kind of in the middle. Now I'm going to get some water and put it in my green. I'm going to clean my brush, get some water, add it to my blue, clean my brush, get some water and add it to my purple. That just helps start activating your paint, so when you're ready to use it, it's ready to go. So I'm going to start with a little bit of green. I'm going to get some paint on my brush, and I'm just going to tap my brush lightly to where I put the water. And you'll see the paint kind of doing its own thing and going, it's following where the water is. And I might brush it a little bit to help it go there where I want it to go. But I like just putting it on there and watching it kind of have its own little idea of where to go. And if you see your paper starting to dry, the paint isn't going to follow that. So you can just paint more water on there. It's a warm day here today, so my water is drying very quickly. So I just have to add some more. This will go right up to the top of my paper there. All right. Now, if you didn't like what it did or you want to change something, you can just add some plain water to that. See, I'm adding plain water and I'm moving the paint around with just some plain water. So you can change it around a little bit if you want. Now, I would like to add some blue. So I'm going to add some more water since some of this is drying. And this is fun. You can do this all around here. You can put as much green as you want. I'm going to add some blue now. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I like it when it mixes together with the green a little bit. Kind of blends together. I think that's pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe in the green a little bit, add some of that blue. Because I think underwater, it's not just one. I get the idea that there's kind of different colors underneath. And I'm going to add some more water here to go all the way down to the bottom of the paper and just go right over your oil pastel that you put on there. You're going to paint right over the top of that. So don't try to paint around it, just paint right over the top of it, because remember what I said, that it'll resist the paint and you're going to see it come through there. So there's another technique I want to do as I'm doing this wet on wet. I'm going to continue my wet on wet, adding more water and adding my colors. But while it's wet, I do want to put a little bit of salt because it gives my picture some extra texture and it looks really cool. So I'm going to sprinkle some salt kind of on those wet areas, kind of near the bottom there. And I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm not going to paint over the top of that. I'm going to let that dry. And I'll show you what we'll do with that in a little bit. But I'm not gonna put any more paint on top of that. I'm gonna just leave that alone now. So I'm gonna go around and add a little more water here because I want to change how that looks a little bit. So I'm just adding some plain water to that. Okay. So now I'm going to extend and I'm going to start putting more water here on this side of my paper and this side of my paper because I want to add more blues and maybe start getting some purples on my picture too. So, and you can have fun with this. You can add green where you want green and blue where you want blue. And then I'm going to do my purples and blues more around the edge because they're a little bit darker. So I'm not going to do my greens around the edge because I think green is a little bit lighter color and I want to save that kind of for the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and just put some plain water on here. Get some purple on my brush. Ooh, that's so pretty. Kind of doing its own thing there. Pretty design. I'm going to add a little bit of water and kind of push the paint around to move it around where I kind of want it to go to because I did like the design it made, but I want it to look more like water. So I'm kind of blending it and smoothing those little edges out a little bit. So I'm going to add some more blue in here, maybe a little blue there also. See those little spiky edges? It looks really cool though. I want to just kind of blend those with some plain water here. Come down here. Now there's another little trick that we can do to lighten up the middle of our picture because I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, I want mine to be maybe just a little bit lighter there. So I like that dark purple down there like that. That looks cool. Add a little more water here. So I'm just going to add some water here in the middle over my paint, just kind of in the middle there. And now I'm going to use a paper towel. I'm going to blot just a little bit. I'm going to blot where I put that water. And it's going to lift off some of the paint and some of the water and give me a little bit of lightness through there. And I just like that, how that looks. It looks pretty cool, I think. And you can do this on your, wherever you would like a little lightness. I would kind of try to keep it to the middle of your painting. As you can see the one I did before, I kept my light area more in the center of my paper. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and continue adding some more water. And you can already see, if you looked at my original one that I made and this one, they are different. I like this because each one I do turns out a little bit different. And that's pretty cool. So I'm going to put some more plain water on there. Add a bit more blue here. Just tap my brush, and then I'm going to kind of show my paint where I want it to go a little bit. With some plain water. We'll be using those hair dryers in just a little bit here too. All right, now I'm going to add some purple here in this corner over here. Yeah, that's such a pretty purple. Now yours might look slightly different if you're using different paints than me. So yours might have a little bit different shade of purple or blue and green. That's okay. Different companies make their paints a little bit different, so sometimes they're not quite the same. So I'm going to go ahead and I got a little bit more paper here to cover with some paint. Try not to get any on my salt that I put there. And you can add more salt. If you want some more salt around your paper, that would be good. I see some heavy water there that I want to kind of blot. That looks cool. And now we'll lighten that up a bit and give me a little more texture under my water. All right. I'm going to add some more purple down here. Maybe a bit more blue too. Oh yeah, that looks pretty. All the way down to the bottom. So you filled in all that area. All right, I'm gonna add a little more salt on those wet areas. So I want a little more texture there. All right, so this is where the part where you can go back and add just a little plain water if there's anything you want to kind of blend in together. This is where I'm going to do that. I love the little texture there. Looks really cool. All right. I like this one. And when you're done, when you're ready to go on, what you're going to want to do is get your hair dryer out and dry this. You can wait till it dries if you want, but if you're a little bit impatient and want it to dry a lot faster, you just grab your hair dryer and we're going to dry it up way quicker. And if you're younger, if you're pretty young, you want to make sure that you get your mom's or dad's permission to use the hair dryer. And always remember not to touch the dryer directly on the paper. You probably want to use it on low, especially if you're younger, because it is kind of warm, hot air that comes out of the end. So don't ever put your hand in front of the air, and don't ever put the hair dryer touching it on the paper. Always do it above the paper. So I'm going to go ahead and do this very quickly. Get this dry. Above the paper. That was quick. And you can tell when it's dry because you won't have any shiny spots on your paper. And when you touch it, you won't put any fingerprints or paint won't come off, okay? So once it's completely dry, all that salt that's on there, you can just take it over to your garbage can and just brush that salt off into the garbage can, okay? You can just rub your hands on it until you feel it coming off. You can kind of feel it feels kind of gritty. You just want to rub that until it comes off and it feels smooth again. Your paper feels smooth. And then you can kind of see what the salt did to paint, it kind of soaks up and leaves, soaks up the paint wherever it landed, the water and paint, and it'll leave some little white marks. It looks really cool. I think I have all my salt wiped off. Oops, a couple little spots there. And I don't know if you can see it on my video very well. You'll be able to see it better in person. But look, I have these little white textures where my salt was. It looks so cool. And it makes it just look more like it's underwater. And notice how my bubbles, see all my bubbles I made? Those are showing up really well. And all my seaweed. So once it's dry and you've got your salt wiped off of it, it's time to add your fun little sea creatures. And you can get some pictures to look at the shape of the animals, and you can add what you want. If you want to add a mermaid or a whale or a shark or a dolphin, you can do that. I like to do jellyfish because they're fun to draw, and I love sea turtles. So I'm going to add a sea turtle and some maybe a couple jellyfish this time. Or you could just do a little school of fish, a little group of fish if you want. It's totally up to you what you want to add to your paper. Now I'm just going to color them in with Sharpie. If you're more comfortable just drawing the outline in a pencil and then tracing it over with your Sharpie and then coloring it in with your Sharpie, you can do that. But I'm just going to go ahead, since we're not making any details on the sea creatures, we're just seeing the silhouette or the shadow of the sea creature. I'm not going to draw it with the pencil first. I'm just going to go ahead and use my Sharpie. So I'm going to find a spot. I want to add my jellyfish. So I'm just going to make the little curved line for the jellyfish, and then another curved line for the rounded part of my jellyfish. And then all it is squiggly lines of different sizes, really close together. You can overlap them. This looks really cool. And then it looks like those long tentacles of the jellyfish floating in the water. And you could go ahead and overlap them. And then I'm going to just color all this in black. Little short strokes close together so I don't have any paint showing through. No white marks. There we go. That's pretty cool. That's a fun looking jellyfish. And then I might make a little sea turtle up here closer, like he's going up for get some air maybe. So I'm just going to make the round shell of this sea turtle first. It's not perfectly round. It kind of almost looks like a egg shape a little bit, or a big almond shape. And I'm going to color that in just like I did my jellyfish. And there's my bubble, which it will help. It's helpful if you don't draw your creature over the oil pastel, because the Sharpie doesn't like to cover that very well. I just didn't notice that bubble there. So I'm going to have another Sharpie here. I'm going to see if that one will. There we go. So maybe you have to watch for where your bubbles are and not draw your creature right over the bubble. I wasn't paying attention there. All right. So now I'm going to make his cute little head coming out. So his little neck, and then his little head. And see, what's cool about the Sharpie is if you don't like the shape at first, you can always change it a little bit just by adding onto it. All right, and then I'm going to add some flippers for his, like he's swimming through the water. So it's just like a curved line like that. And then another curved line, and then round it out. And that's a little flipper. And the same thing on the other side. That curved line almost looks like an arch. And then another curved line underneath it, parallel. And then connect them with another curved line there. Those are cute little flippers. And then his back ones aren't quite as long. So I'm making just a curved line out like that. And then just like that. So his back ones just look a little different. And you can always look at a picture if you want to get the exact shape. And then he has a cute little tail coming out. So there's my jellyfish, or my sea turtle and my jellyfish. And you can add, if you want to add a couple more little fish down here, I might add just a couple little ones. I make like a sideways raindrop shape first. Then I add my little tail. And then my little triangles for my fins there. Here we go, a couple fish down there. And that is it. You have done a beautiful under the sea watercolor painting. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project, and you can always send me a picture of your finished project so that I can see what you created. I love seeing my students' work, so you're welcome to do that. So thank you.